Black young woman is humiliated by teacher. The next day her grandfather shows up at school. Silence took over the classroom as teacher Helena Mitchell pointed at her with a malicious smile. Camilla Johnson, sitting in the front row, felt the stares of all her classmates on her as she fought against the tears that threatened to fall. Look everyone, this is an example of what happens when we try to include people who simply don't belong in this environment, said the teacher while displaying Camilla's paper with red markings all over it. Hands calloused from farm work weren't made to hold pens in elite institutions. Camilla looked at her own hands, marked by work on her grandfather's farm. The same hands that every morning helped with the milking before catching the bus to school. The same hands that wrote that essay with such commitment, talking about sustainable development in American agriculture, a topic she knew not from theory but from practice. "Excuse me, teacher," Roberta Anderson's voice, the richest and most popular student at Horizon Academy, echoed through the auditorium. "I think we should give a round of applause to our classmate for getting a scholarship she clearly doesn't deserve." Laughter echoed through the auditorium as Camilla gathered her materials with trembling hands. No one noticed when she hurriedly left, tears finally overcoming her resistance. No one except Matthew Oliver, one of the few teachers who always treated all students with equal respect. In the small apartment she shared with her father in Riverdale, a mid-sized town in the Midwest known for agribusiness, Camilla threw her backpack on the couch and went straight to the bathroom. Under the shower, she let the water wash away the weight of that day. At 17, she had already faced much more than most of her privileged classmates could imagine. "Mila, are you home?" Her father John Johnson's voice came from the hallway. "I'm in the shower, Dad," she replied, trying to disguise her choked voice. When she came out of the bathroom, she found John in the small kitchen brewing coffee. An employee in the administrative department of a local hospital, he had raised Camilla by himself since his wife passed away when the girl was only 5 years old. "So you came home early today," he commented, immediately noticing his daughter's red eyes. "What happened?" Camilla hesitated. She didn't want to worry her father, who had enough problems already. But she also knew she couldn't hide it from him for long. "Miss Mitchell, she humiliated my work in front of the whole class, said people like me shouldn't be there," she murmured, sitting at the table. John Johnson took a deep breath, containing the anger that grew inside him. "Did you show this paper to your grandfather before turning it in?" Camilla nodded. "Grandpa Gerald liked it so much he even said I should publish it in some specialized magazine." "And what was the paper about?" "It was about sustainable farming methods that could be implemented on small farms in the Midwest, reducing costs and increasing production without harming the environment." John smiled with pride. "I'm going to call your grandfather." "No, Dad," Camilla protested. "Grandpa already has so much to worry about. And besides, he's far away on the farm. What could he do?" "You'd be surprised," John murmured, picking up his cell phone. The next morning, Camilla dragged her feet at the entrance of Horizon Academy. She had seriously thought about pretending to be sick, but her father had insisted that she shouldn't give teacher Helena that satisfaction. "Be strong like your mother was," he said before leaving for work. "And remember, you have just as much right to be there as any of them." The buzz in the courtyard was more intense than usual. Groups of students were pointing to the sky, and Camilla followed their gazes. A black and silver helicopter was approaching, with the Geratech logo emblazoned on the side, one of the largest agricultural technology companies in America. "What's going on?" she asked Peter, one of the few classmates with whom she had any friendship. "I don't know, but they say it's some important businessman. Even Principal Claudia is waiting on the soccer field, along with the school board members." The helicopter landed on the large field, raising a small cloud of dust. The doors opened and an elderly man got out, leaning on a rustic wooden cane that contrasted with his impeccable suit. Behind him, 2 men in suits followed, carrying executive folders. Camilla froze. She knew that figure well. "Grandpa," she murmured in disbelief. Gerald Johnson walked with slow but firm steps toward Principal Claudia Morrison, who smiled nervously. After a brief greeting, he looked around as if searching for someone. His eyes met Camilla's and a warm smile lit up his wrinkled face. "Ah, there's my granddaughter," he exclaimed, opening his arms. A murmur ran through the gathered students. "Granddaughter?" That scholarship student was Gerald Johnson's granddaughter. Camilla crossed the courtyard and hugged her grandfather, still not understanding what was happening. "Grandpa, what are you doing here? And in a helicopter?" "I came to resolve an important matter," he replied, loud enough for everyone around to hear. "I heard that my granddaughter, one of the brightest minds of this generation in sustainable agriculture, had her work ridiculed due to ignorance and prejudice." Principal Claudia turned pale. "Mr. Johnson, I'm not aware of any such incident in our institution. Perhaps we could talk in my office." "Certainly we'll talk, Principal Morrison," Gerald responded, with a firmness that didn't match his fragile appearance. "But first, I'd like to attend Ms. Helena Mitchell's class. I believe it's about to start, isn't it?" The eyes of all the students turned to the figure of teacher Helena, who had just arrived at the courtyard and was observing the scene with visible discomfort. "Mr. Johnson, it's an honor to have you at our institution," said the principal, nervously, wringing her hands. "But perhaps it would be better—" "I insist, Principal," interrupted Gerald. "After all, I'm the one who finances 20% of the scholarships at this academy, including the social inclusion program that allowed many of these young people to access quality education. I believe I have the right to see how my investment is being applied, don't you agree?" A stunned silence followed his words. Camilla looked at her grandfather as if she had never seen him before. Gerald Johnson, the man she knew as a simple farmer who cultivated the land with his own hands, was actually the owner of Geratech. The man who funded scholarships and ran one of the largest agricultural technology companies in the country. "Come, Mila," he said, offering his arm to his granddaughter. "I'm very interested in seeing how Ms. Mitchell approaches the topic of sustainable development." Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to like, and especially subscribe to the channel. It really helps us who are just starting out. Now continuing. In the classroom, the atmosphere was one of absolute tension. Helena Mitchell tried to maintain her composure while explaining basic concepts of sustainability, constantly interrupted by Gerald Johnson's insightful questions. Camilla observed, the scene divided between embarrassment and the feeling that she was finally receiving some justice. "So, Ms. Mitchell, would you say that the initiatives of small rural producers are irrelevant to American agribusiness?" asked Gerald, after Helena made a derogatory comment about family farming. "That's not exactly what I meant, Mr. Johnson," she replied nervously. "I was merely emphasizing that the volume of production—" "Interesting," interrupted Gerald, leafing through some pages he had taken from his folder, "because I have here my granddaughter's paper, which you considered simplistic and naive according to your own annotations. However, the methods described here are precisely those we implemented in our company 2 years ago, increasing productivity by 35% and reducing costs by almost 50%. The students exchanged glances. Roberta Anderson, who had led the laughter, the day before looked particularly uncomfortable. "In fact," continued Gerald, "we're about to publish these results at the next International Conference on Sustainable Agriculture. Curious that you didn't recognize the quality of this work, Ms. Mitchell." At the end of class, Gerald asked all the teachers, board members, and the administration to gather in the auditorium for an important conversation. The news spread quickly, and soon the place was filled with curious students, staff, and to everyone's surprise, several parents who had been summoned at the last minute. On stage, Gerald Johnson was seated next to the visibly apprehensive principal. John Johnson had arrived in a hurry from the hospital and took a seat next to his daughter in the front row. "Good afternoon, everyone," Gerald began, his calm voice filling the auditorium. "For those who don't know me, I'm Gerald Johnson, founder and CEO of Geratech. But above all, I'm the grandfather of Camilla Johnson, a scholarship student at this academy." He paused, looking directly at Helena Mitchell, who was seated among the teachers. "I grew up on a small farm in the Midwest. My parents were workers who could barely sign their own names. I studied by the light of a kerosene lamp after exhausting days in the fields. When I invented my first automated irrigation system using discarded materials, I was ridiculed by the large producers in the region." Gerald smiled, looking at his own calloused hands. These hands that Ms. Mitchell considers inadequate for holding elite pens are the same hands that created technology that now feeds millions of people. They are the same hands that sign the checks that keep many of the scholarship students in this institution. A murmur ran through the auditorium. I came here today not just as an outraged businessman or as a protective grandfather, but as someone who believes that knowledge and education should be accessible to all, regardless of skin color, social origin, or accent. At this moment, the two executives accompanying him began distributing folders to the board members and to some parents. What you are receiving are records of previous complaints of discrimination at this institution, systematically ignored by the administration. There are also testimonies from former scholarship students who abandoned their studies due to the differential treatment they received. Principal Claudia stood up, visibly disturbed. "Mr. Johnson, this is an outrage. We have a zero-tolerance policy against any type of discrimination." "On paper, Principal Morrison," Gerald responded calmly. "But in practice, your administration has consistently ignored reports from students like my granddaughter. I have here," he raised another folder, "emails exchanged between you and Ms. Mitchell, in which you discuss how to better filter scholarship students to prevent students from rural backgrounds from compromising the level of the institution." A stunned silence took over the auditorium. Teacher Helena abruptly stood up. "This is slander. I demand that you prove these accusations." "Proof?" Gerald gestured, and one of the executives activated the projector, displaying the emails on the large screen in the auditorium. "Here they are with date, time, and sending IP. Our technology teams can be quite efficient when necessary." In the middle of the audience, Roberta Anderson, the student who had humiliated Camilla, was pale. Next to her, her father, Richard Anderson, a well-known agribusiness entrepreneur, looked equally disturbed. "Mr. Johnson," said Richard, standing up, "I request to speak." Gerald nodded, allowing the man to approach the stage. "I must confess that I am shocked by what I see here today," Richard began, "but I must also make a confession. 3 years ago, when I was on the verge of bankruptcy due to a plague that destroyed almost all of my production, it was the technology developed by Geratech that saved my company. At the time, I didn't know I was negotiating with the grandfather of my daughter's classmate." He looked at Roberta, who now seemed ashamed. "My daughter was raised with privileges that I didn't have, and I feel that I failed to teach her fundamental values. I publicly apologize to Camilla and to Mr. Johnson for her behavior." Roberta, with tears in her eyes, stood up and walked over to Camilla. "Forgive me," she said quietly. "I was cruel and unfair to you. I have no excuses." Camilla, surprised by the turn of events, simply nodded, not knowing exactly how to react. Gerald Johnson resumed speaking. "I didn't come here to shut down this institution or withdraw my financial support. I came to transform it. From today, I demand a complete reform of inclusion and diversity policies. I want a committee formed by students, teachers, and parents who will oversee this transition." He looked directly at Helena. "As for Ms. Mitchell, I leave in the hands of the board the decision about her permanence. But I must inform you that, if she stays, I will withdraw all my financial support and take this case to the appropriate educational authorities." Teacher Helena, realizing that her position was irremediably compromised, stood up indignantly. "You can't treat me like this. I have 20 years of career. I'm respected in academic circles. You had my respect until you used your position of power to humiliate talented young people like my granddaughter," Gerald replied. "People like you are responsible for maintaining the cycle of inequality that so harms our country." At that moment, a young woman stood up from the audience. It was Luisa Fernandez, a quiet student who rarely spoke up. "I was also humiliated by Ms. Mitchell," she said with a trembling voice. "On my first day here, she said my southern accent was unacceptable in an elite environment, and that I should learn to speak like civilized people." Other students began to stand up, sharing similar experiences. What had begun as a defense of Camilla transformed into a movement of revelations that had long remained silenced within those corridors. Principal Claudia, seeing the situation completely escape her control, tried one last maneuver. Mr. Johnson, perhaps we could discuss this in private. I'm sure we can reach an agreement that benefits everyone. There is nothing to discuss in private, Principal, Gerald replied. This institution exists to form citizens, not to perpetuate prejudices. What we decide today will be done with transparency and participation from the entire school community. He turned to the audience. From today, any student or teacher who feels discriminated against will have a direct channel for complaints. I will personally finance an awareness program on diversity and inclusion that will be implemented immediately. The applause started, slowly, growing to fill the entire auditorium. Camilla looked at her grandfather with admiration. That simple man she knew from the farm, who woke up before sunrise to tend the land, was also a visionary leader and a tireless defender of equality. "Why did you never tell me, Grandpa?" she asked when they were finally alone, as the meeting dissolved into small discussion groups. Gerald smiled, the fatigue finally showing on his wrinkled face. "Because I wanted you to grow up valuing the simple things, Mila. I wanted you to know what it's like to work hard and create something with your own hands. Wealth and power are tools, not definitions of who we are." Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It really helps us who are just starting out. Now continuing. In the weeks that followed, Horizon Academy underwent a profound transformation. Teacher Helena resigned before the official decision of the board, and Principal Claudia was removed after a more detailed investigation revealed other irregularities in her management. A new Ethics and Diversity Committee was formed, with representatives from all sectors of the school community. To the surprise of many, Roberta Anderson volunteered to be part of it, demonstrating a genuine desire for change. Camilla returned, to attending classes now with a new confidence. The humiliations ceased, replaced by a respect she had earned not by her grandfather's status, but by her own intellectual merit. On a sunny afternoon, while studying under the shade of a tree, in the courtyard, she was surprised by Roberta's approach. "May I sit?" asked the girl with a shyness that didn't match her usual personality. Camilla nodded, closing her book. "I wanted to apologize to you once more," Roberta began, "not just for what happened that day, but for all the time I treated you as inferior." "It's in the past," Camilla replied, sincere. "No, it's not," insisted Roberta. "I need you to know something. My grandfather, he was always talking about a man who saved him from ruin, a man who, according to him, was the most intelligent and honorable he had ever met." Camilla looked at her with curiosity. "My grandfather died 2 years ago, but until his last days, he mentioned the name Gerald Johnson with admiration. When I discovered that the man he talked about was your grandfather, well, I realized how wrong I had been. Your grandfather and mine knew each other? More than that. My grandfather owned a small farm that bordered your grandfather's family's land. When a flood destroyed everything he had, it was your grandfather who gave him a loan to start over, with no interest, no deadline. He used to say that, if it weren't for Gerald Johnson, there wouldn't even be a legacy for my father to inherit." Camilla smiled, thinking about how her grandfather had never mentioned this episode. "That sounds just like him. He also developed an irrigation system that saved my grandfather's farm during the worst drought in 50 years, continued Roberta. "That was the beginning of Geratech, you know. My grandfather was one of the first customers." The two girls continued talking, discovering connections between their families that transcended the appearances and prejudices that had marked their relationship until then. Meanwhile, in the temporary office that Gerald had established at the academy, he and his son John were discussing the next steps. "You didn't need to do all this, Dad," said John. "We could have simply transferred Camilla to another school." Gerald shook his head. "And let them continue discriminating against other young people? No, son. Sometimes we need to use the power. We have to change things, not just for ourselves, but for everyone." "You've always been like this," John smiled. "I remember when I was a child, and you gave literacy classes to the children of farm workers after a full day working under the sun." "Your mother was the one who really made a difference," replied Gerald with a distant look. "She always said that knowledge was the only wealth that no one could take from you." That same day in the late afternoon, a special assembly was called in the auditorium. The students were curious, as the announcement mentioned structural changes at the academy. When Gerald Johnson took the stage, accompanied by Professor Matthew Oliver, who had been appointed interim director, a respectful silence took over the place. "Good afternoon, everyone," Gerald began. "In the last few weeks, we have been working intensively to transform this academy into a truly inclusive and diverse space. Today, I want to announce that Geratech, in partnership with Horizon Academy, is launching a mentoring program for young talents from rural and peripheral areas." The applause was immediate. Gerald raised his hand, asking for silence to continue. "This program goes beyond scholarships. It will offer personalized guidance, exchanges with partner universities, and internships in companies committed to diversity." He paused, looking directly at his granddaughter. "And the coordinator of this program will be the student who inspired me to create it, my granddaughter, Camilla Johnson." Camilla widened her eyes, surprised by the announcement. She had never considered taking on such a responsibility. "But Grandpa, I'm still a student," she murmured when he called her to the stage. "And who better to understand the needs of these young people than someone who has gone through what you've gone through?" he replied, smiling. "Besides, you'll have all the necessary support." Hesitantly, Camilla took the stage and faced the audience. She saw familiar faces, her father, proud, Peter, her loyal friend, Roberta, with an encouraging smile, Louisa, the Southern girl who had found the courage to denounce prejudice, and so many others whose lives had been touched by recent events. She began, her voice failing from nervousness. She took a deep breath and tried again. "I grew up hearing my grandfather say that true revolution begins in the classroom. For a long time, I didn't fully understand what he meant. But now, looking at all of you, at everything that has happened in these last few weeks, I'm beginning to understand." Her voice gained strength as she spoke. "Education is not just about learning formulas, dates, or theories. It's about growing as a person, developing empathy, understanding that each of us has a unique and valuable story. It's about recognizing that diversity is not a problem to be tolerated, but a richness to be celebrated." Applause erupted spontaneously. Camilla waited for it to die down to continue. "This program will not just be for young people from rural or peripheral areas. It will be for all of us, because we all need to learn to see beyond appearances, beyond stereotypes. We all need to understand that knowledge has no color, no social class, no accent." At the back of the auditorium, some people were discreetly wiping away tears. Among them, surprisingly, was Richard Anderson, Roberta's father. "My grandfather built a billion-dollar company with the same hands that planted corn and harvested coffee. He taught me that what matters is not where we come from, but where we want to go. And I want to go to a future where no young person is humiliated because of their origin, where no talent is wasted due to prejudice." Gerald observed his granddaughter with evident pride. That shy girl who had grown up among plantations had transformed into a young leader, capable of clearly articulating ideals that he himself had taken a lifetime to develop. When the assembly ended, a line of students formed to speak with Camilla. Some wanted to participate in the program, others simply wanted to express support. Among them was Louisa, the Southern girl. "Your courage changed my life," she said, hugging Camilla with emotion. "For the first time since I arrived here, I'm not ashamed of my accent." In the months that followed, Horizon Academy became a model of inclusion and diversity for other schools in the region. The mentoring program expanded, serving not only students from the institution itself, but also young people from neighboring public schools. Gerald Johnson, even with his busy schedule, made a point of personally participating in the activities. On a Saturday afternoon, during a workshop on agricultural technology for teenagers from a nearby rural community, he watched Camilla guiding the young people with patience and enthusiasm. "She reminds me of you when you were young," commented John, who accompanied him. "The same passion for knowledge, the same desire to make a difference." Gerald smiled, nodding. "She has a lot of your mother in her too. The determination, the inner strength. You know, son, when I started Geratech, Many people doubted that a man with only a grade school education, the son of illiterate farm workers, could create something significant. And you proved them wrong. Yes, but it wasn't easy. There were times when I almost gave up. It was your mother who convinced me to continue, even when it seemed impossible. She said that our dreams should not be limited by what others thought. Farvus? John felt a lump in his throat, remembering his wife, who had departed so early. Mila is the spitting image of her. Yes, she is, agreed Gerald. And that's why I know she'll go far beyond what we can imagine. As they talked, they didn't notice Roberta Anderson approaching. The girl had become a constant presence in the projects led by Camilla, demonstrating a genuine transformation in her attitude. "Mr. Johnson," she called timidly, "could I speak with you for a moment?" Gerald nodded, indicating the bench beside him. "I wanted to personally thank you for what you did," Roberta began. "Not just for the academy, but for my family. My father told me the whole story about how you helped my grandfather years ago." "Your grandfather, Robert Anderson, was an honorable man," replied Gerald. "He paid back every cent of the loan, even when I said it wasn't necessary. True integrity is revealed in difficult times, and your grandfather had that in abundance." Roberta smiled, moved. "My father said you never accepted anything in return, even when our company started to grow." "The greatest reward is seeing the good we do flourish," said Gerald. "Your grandfather created jobs, supported families, contributed to the community. That's worth more than any financial return. That's why I've decided," continued Roberta with determination in her voice, "that I'm going to study agronomy and sustainable development. I want to follow in the footsteps of my grandfather and you, creating solutions that help small producers." Gerald smiled, surprised and pleased with the revelation. "The world needs young people like you, Roberta, and I'm sure your grandfather would be very proud." From a distance, Camilla observed the conversation between her grandfather and her former rival, now a friend. The transformation that had occurred in those months went far beyond institutional policies or educational programs. It was a profound change in how those young people saw the world and each other. At the end of that school year, Horizon Academy held its traditional graduation ceremony. For Camilla and her senior classmates, it was the end of a cycle and the beginning of a new journey. The surprise of the night came when Professor Matthew, now the permanent director, announced the class speaker. "This year, by unanimous vote, of the faculty and students, our speaker will be Camilla Johnson." The applause was warm when Camilla took the stage. Wearing the cap and gown, she looked much older and more confident than the shy girl who had entered that school 3 years earlier. "When I entered this academy as a scholarship student, I carried with me not only the dreams of my family, but also the weight of being different," she began. "Hands calloused by rural work, a country accent, a worldview formed more by practice than by books." She looked at the audience, where her father and grandfather watched emotionally. "Today, I know that these differences are my greatest strength. I know that knowledge doesn't belong to a social class or a type of person. It belongs to those who have the courage to seek it, the humility to share it, and the wisdom to use it for good." In the front row, Roberta smiled, nodding in agreement. "We leave here today not only with diplomas, but with a lesson that goes far beyond books, that respect, empathy, and diversity are not abstract concepts, but daily practices that transform lives. Each of us has the power to be an agent of that transformation." Camilla paused, looking at her fellow graduates. "Some of us will go to universities, others to the job market. Some will return to their communities, others will explore new horizons. But we all carry with us the responsibility to build a world where a person's value is not measured by their appearance, origin, or social condition, but by their character and their actions." The applause began before she even finished. When she finally left the stage, she was received by emotional hugs from classmates and teachers. After the ceremony, while families celebrated and took photos, Gerald approached his granddaughter with an envelope in his hands. "This is for you, Mila," he said, handing her the envelope. "Open it when you're alone." Intrigued, Camilla kept the envelope in her purse. Only late at night, already at home, did she remember it. When she opened it, she found a handwritten letter and a small flash drive. "Dear Mila," said the letter in her grandfather's careful handwriting. "When I was born, my parents were landless rural workers. I grew up watching my father bow before bosses who treated him as inferior. I swore to myself that I would change that reality, not just for my family, but for all families who lived like us. The path was long and difficult. I was humiliated, underestimated, rejected. But each no I received, each closed door, each look of contempt only strengthened my determination. On the flash drive that accompanies this letter, you will find the complete history of Geratech, from the first irrigation system I invented to the future projects I dream of accomplishing. You will also find documents that prove that, from today, you are a shareholder of the company, with 25% of the shares. I don't give you this as a gift, but as a recognition of your worth. I saw in you, since you were little, the same strength that moved me throughout my life. I saw your intelligence, your perseverance, your compassion. Use this power wisely, Mila, not to accumulate wealth or status, but to continue the work of transforming lives through education and technology. Always remember that our true value is not in the titles we display or the bank accounts we possess, but in the difference we make in the lives of others. With all my love and pride, your grandfather, Gerald." Camilla read the letter several times, silent tears running down her face. She thought about everything she had experienced that year, the transformations that had occurred not only at the academy, but in her own life. She put the letter on the table and turned on her laptop to access the contents of the flash drive. The first folder contained old photos, her grandfather as a young man working the land, the first prototype of the irrigation system, the small workshop that would later become the headquarters of Geratech. There were also digitized documents, the deed to the first property he bought, the company registration, newspaper clippings about his technological innovations, and to her surprise, an entire folder dedicated to her, Camilla. Her grandfather had kept every school report card, every childhood drawing, every paper she had done since kindergarten. That's when she understood. Her grandfather had never been just a simple farmer. He had always been that impressive man, the visionary, the entrepreneur, but he had chosen to live simply, to value manual work, to keep his feet on the ground. And he had raised his son, John, with the same values that he now passed on to Camilla. The next morning, she went to the farm that her grandfather maintained on the outskirts of town. She found him, as always, in the field, checking the new coffee seedlings he had just planted. "Grandpa," she called, approaching. Gerald turned, smiling when he saw his granddaughter. "Good morning, Mila. You're up early today." "I read your letter," she said simply. He nodded, taking off his work gloves. "And what did you think?" "Why? Did you never tell me before? About the company, about everything you built?" Gerald indicated a bench under a leafy tree, and they sat down. "Because I wanted you to know me as a person, not as a businessman. I wanted you to value work, the land, the simple things. Wealth and power are tools, Mila, not definitions of who we are. But all these years, you lived like an ordinary farmer, while commanding a billion-dollar company." Gerald laughed. "And who said I'm not an ordinary farmer? That's exactly what I am. The difference is that I'm also other things. Just as you are not just a scholarship student, you are also a leader, a visionary, a young woman who has already begun to change the world around you." Camilla thought about everything she had experienced in recent months, the humiliation in the classroom, the revelation about her grandfather, the transformation at the academy, her own evolution from a shy girl to a confident young woman. "What's you did for me, confronting the school, exposing Ms. Mitchell and the principal. It was more than I expected." "I did what any grandfather would do," he replied simply. "I protected my granddaughter, but I also did what I believe is right, fighting prejudice and creating opportunities for talented young people, regardless of their origin." He took a handful of soil and let it run through his fingers. "This soil teaches us a lot, Mila. It doesn't matter the color of the seeds we plant, whether they're big or small, whether they came from far or near. What matters is the care with which we treat them, the water we offer, the light we allow them to receive. People are like seeds. Give them the right conditions, and you'll see flowers bloom where there was once dry land." Camilla smiled, recognizing her grandfather's simple and profound wisdom. "And what about the company? The 25% of the shares?" "They're yours to use as you see fit. I know you'll make good use of them. But I don't know anything about managing a company of that size." "You'll learn," he replied with confidence, "the same way I learned, starting with the basics, making mistakes, getting up after each fall, and know that I'll be by your side on this journey, as will your father." At that moment, John approached, bringing a tray with freshly brewed coffee and homemade bread. "Serious conversation so early?" he asked, smiling at seeing father and daughter. "We're talking about the future," replied Gerald, "and about seeds." The three sat together, enjoying the coffee and the cool morning breeze. Camilla observed her father and grandfather, thinking about how she had grown up surrounded by so much love and wisdom, even without the luxuries that her school classmates flaunted. "Have you decided about college?" asked John, breaking the silence. Camilla nodded. "I'm going to study agricultural and environmental engineering. I want to continue Grandpa's work, developing technologies that help small producers thrive sustainably." Gerald smiled, proud. "And the mentoring program at the academy?" he asked. "I'm going to continue coordinating it, even during college. It's too important to abandon." "It's going to be a demanding routine," commented John, concerned. "Nothing I can't handle," replied Camilla with confidence. "After all, I have the best examples of hard work and persistence right here in front of me." Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It really helps us who are just starting out. Now continuing. 5 years later, the auditorium of the State University was packed for the graduation ceremony. Among the graduates, Camilla Johnson stood out not only for the Medal of Honor she carried, but also for the remarkable presence she had developed over the years. In the audience, Gerald Johnson, now using a cane, watched his granddaughter with tears in his eyes. Beside him, John made no attempt to hide his pride. "And to deliver the speech on behalf of the graduates," announced the president, "we invite student Camilla Johnson, who completed the Agricultural and Environmental Engineering program with the highest average in the history of this institution." The applause was warm when Camilla took the podium. At 22, she was no longer the insecure teenager who had been humiliated in the classroom. She was a confident young woman who had become a reference in sustainable technology projects for rural communities. "As a child," she began, "my grandfather taught me that knowledge is the only wealth that no one can take from us. I grew up among plantations, observing how small seeds can transform into leafy trees if they receive proper care." She looked at the audience, finding familiar faces. Her father and grandfather, of course, but also Roberta Anderson, who had become her friend and partner in various projects, Luisa Fernandez, the Southern girl who now worked in the mentoring program at Horizon Academy, and even Professor Matthew, who continued as director of the institution where it all began. The journey that brought me here wasn't easy. There were moments of doubt, of fear, of almost giving up. But there were also people who believed in me when I didn't even believe in myself, who saw beyond appearances, beyond stereotypes. She paused, emotional. "The America we dream of building is not one where a few prosper at the expense of many, but a country where each person has the opportunity to develop their potential, regardless of their origin, color, or social condition. A country where knowledge is not a privilege but a right, where technology serves to include, not to separate." Applause interrupted her speech. When it quieted, she continued, "We leave this university today not only with diplomas but with a responsibility to use what we've learned to transform realities, whether developing technologies that improve the lives of underserved communities, creating companies that value diversity and sustainability, or simply sharing knowledge with those who thirst to learn." She smiled, looking at her grandfather. 5 years ago, I discovered that my grandfather, a man I knew as a simple farmer, was actually one of the biggest businessmen in the country. But you know what I learned from that revelation? That titles, positions, and bank accounts don't define a person. What defines them are their actions, their values, the difference they make in the lives of others. Gerald discreetly wiped away a tear. "Today, alongside my fellow graduates, I reaffirm the commitment I made years ago, to use the knowledge I've acquired not to accumulate privileges, but to create opportunities, not to build walls, but to construct bridges. The round of applause was deafening when she concluded. Fellow graduates stood up, followed by the professors and soon the entire auditorium. After the ceremony, while family and friends congratulated each other, Camilla was approached by a reporter from a magazine specializing in agribusiness. "Ms. Johnson, your trajectory is inspiring. From a scholarship student at an elite academy to an award-winning engineer and shareholder of one of the largest agricultural technology companies in the country. What motivates you?" Camilla smiled, reflective. "What motivates me is knowing that there are thousands of young people like me across America. Talented, dedicated young people who just need an opportunity. Each project I develop, each technology we create at Geratech, each scholarship our mentoring program offers, is a bridge for these young people to cross the abyss of inequality." "And what about the teacher who humiliated you years ago? We heard that she recently tried for a position at another educational institution and was rejected when her story came to light." Camilla's smile disappeared, giving way to a serious expression. "I don't follow Ms. Mitchell's life, and I don't take pleasure in her difficulties. I sincerely hope that she has learned from her mistakes and found a way to give new meaning to her actions. I believe in people's capacity for transformation." The reporter seemed surprised by the answer. "You don't hold resentments?" "Holding resentments is like drinking poison expecting the other person to die," replied Camilla. "I prefer to use my energy to build, not to destroy." The best response I could give to that humiliation was to become exactly what she said I would never be: a respected professional, a leader, someone who makes a difference. When the interview ended, Camilla joined her family. Gerald, now almost 80, maintained his mental vigor, even though his body was beginning to show signs of fatigue. "You gave me the best birthday present, Mila," he said, hugging his granddaughter. "Seeing you graduate, hearing your speech, I couldn't ask for anything better." "And the surprise we prepared is still to come," she replied, exchanging a knowing look with her father. That night, at a dinner that brought together family and close friends, Camilla made the announcement. "Grandpa, in honor of everything you've built and the values you've taught us, we're launching the Gerald Johnson Institute, a non-profit organization dedicated to providing technological education and support to young farmers across America." Gerald looked at his granddaughter, surprised and moved. "Mila, you didn't need to. The Institute already has partnerships with 5 universities and 12 rural communities," she continued. "The idea is to create innovation hubs in underserved regions where young farmers can have access to cutting-edge technologies and guidance to implement them." John added, "The first headquarters will be inaugurated next month, right in the region where you were born, Dad, where your parents worked as landless laborers." Gerald couldn't hold back the tears. Life had formed a perfect circle. The boy who had grown up watching his parents bow before merciless bosses now had his name on an institute that would transform the reality of families like his had been. Among the dinner guests was Roberta Anderson, who after graduating in agronomy had joined the Geratech team leading sustainable development projects. "Ms. Mitchell contacted me last week," she commented in a moment of private conversation with Camilla. "She wanted me to intercede for her, to arrange some job at Geratech." Camilla raised her eyebrows, surprised. "And what did you say?" "I said that Geratech has a rigorous hiring policy, based not only on technical qualifications, but also on human values. But I suggested that she look into the professional requalification program we offer in partnership with the city." "You did the right thing," agreed Camilla. "Everyone deserves a second chance, including her." The two friends smiled, remembering how their own relationship had begun with hostility and prejudice and transformed into a partnership based on mutual respect. Later, when most of the guests had already left, Camilla found her grandfather sitting on the porch contemplating the stars. "What are you thinking about, Grandpa?" she asked, sitting beside him. "About how life comes full circle, Mila," he replied, smiling. "About how that humiliation you suffered ended up being the trigger for so many positive transformations." Horizon Academy is now a reference in inclusion and diversity. The mentoring program has already helped hundreds of young people, and now, this new institute that will bear my name. All because you had the courage to take a stand, to use your power to do good. Gerald shook his head. No, Mila. All because you had the courage not to let humiliation break your spirit. It was your strength that inspired mine. It has always been like this. It's the young who show us the way. He took his granddaughter's hand, caressing the work scars that she, like him, carried with pride. People will always try to diminish you, Mila. They'll say you don't belong, that you don't deserve, that you're not capable. But always remember, your worth is not defined by what others think of you, but by what you know to be true. Camilla nodded, recalling the long road she had traveled since that day when she was humiliated in the auditorium of Horizon Academy. You know what makes me most proud, Grandpa? It's not the diploma nor the position in the company, not even the institute we created. It's knowing that we helped change the way those young people see the world and each other. It's knowing that somehow we contributed to a more just and inclusive future. Gerald smiled, squeezing his granddaughter's hand. That's the true legacy, Mila. Not the buildings we construct, the companies we found, or the money we accumulate. The true legacy is the lives we touch, the minds we help open, the hearts we inspire. That night, under the starry sky, grandfather and granddaughter shared not only blood ties, but a common vision of an America where prejudice and inequality would give way to respect and inclusion. An America where young people like Camilla would not be judged by the color of their skin or the origin of their family, but by the strength of their character and the brilliance of their intelligence. Months later, at the inauguration ceremony of the Gerald Johnson Institute, hundreds of people gathered to celebrate. Among them were Camilla's former classmates, teachers from Horizon Academy, community leaders, and dozens of young farmers who would be the first beneficiaries of the program. In the center of the stage, a bronze plaque bore the words, "Knowledge is the only wealth that no one can take from you. Sharing it is the greatest proof of greatness." When the time came for her speech, Camilla looked at the audience and smiled. 6 years ago, a teacher said my calloused hands weren't made to hold pens from elite institutions. Today, these same hands not only write academic articles and develop patented technologies, but also continue to plant, harvest, and get dirty with soil. Because I learned from my grandfather that we should never be ashamed of our origins, but rather transform them into our greatest strength. Gerald, seated in the front row, smiled with tears in his eyes. This institute is not just a building with classrooms and laboratories. It's a symbol of resistance against prejudice. It's a beacon of hope for young people who, like I once was, are underestimated because of their appearance, their origin, or their social condition. It's a reminder that the America we want to build doesn't exclude. It includes, doesn't separate, it unites, doesn't humiliate, it values. She paused, looking directly at her grandfather. My grandfather, Gerald Johnson, was born into a family of landless workers. He grew up watching his parents bow before bosses who treated them as inferiors, but instead of resigning himself, he transformed each humiliation into fuel for his success. Not a success measured in zeros in the bank account, but a success measured in transformed lives, in strengthened communities, in shared knowledge. Applause erupted spontaneously. Camilla waited for it to diminish to continue. Today, when I look at these young farmers who will be the first beneficiaries of this institute, I see the same sparkle in their eyes that my grandfather must have had when he created his first irrigation system. The same thirst for knowledge, the same determination to improve not just their own lives, but the lives of their communities. She smiled, emotional. This is just the beginning. Our goal is to expand the Institute to all regions of America, bringing technology, education, and opportunities to young farmers across the country. Because we believe that the future of American agriculture is not only in large properties with imported machinery, but also in small family farms, where innovation arises from necessity, and sustainability is a matter of survival. At the end of the speech, the ovation was deafening. Gerald, with John's help, took the stage to hug his granddaughter. The 3 generations together symbolized the journey of a family that, starting from the most adverse conditions, had not only prospered, but dedicated itself to creating opportunities for others to prosper as well. As they left the stage, Camilla was approached by a young woman of no more than 15 with Native American features and a shy smile. "Miss Johnson," said the girl with a slight accent from the West, "your speech inspired me so much. I come from a reservation in Arizona, and I want to study engineering like you." Camilla smiled, recognizing in that young woman the same dream she herself had cherished. "What's your name?" "Yara White." "Well, Yara, would you like to see our facilities? We have a specific program for high school students who wish to pursue a career in engineering." The girl's eyes sparkled. "Really? But my family can't afford to pay." "All the Institute's activities are free," explained Camilla. "Our goal is precisely to create opportunities for talented young people, regardless of their financial condition." As they walked through the Institute's facilities, Camilla presented the laboratories, classrooms equipped with cutting-edge technology, the specialized library on agricultural topics. "All this because of a humiliation?" asked Yara, after hearing the complete story. Camilla smiled. "Yes and no. The humiliation was just the trigger. What really built all this was the strength of people who refused to accept that prejudice and inequality are permanent conditions. People like my grandfather, who transformed each no into a new path to yes." From a distance, Gerald observed his granddaughter interacting with the young Native American woman. He saw himself decades ago, sharing knowledge with the children of rural workers, believing that education was the surest path to freedom. At that moment, he knew that his legacy was secure, not just the material legacy, the company, the patents, but the truly important legacy, the values, the ethics, the commitment to social transformation. The journey that had begun with a barefoot boy dreaming amid poverty now reached a new chapter. And even if he weren't present to see all the fruits that would still be harvested, he was certain that the seed had been planted in fertile soil and would be cared for by loving and competent hands. "Someday," he said to John, who remained by his side, "America will be a country where no one is humiliated because of their origin, where merit is recognized regardless of skin color or accent. A country where young people like Camilla and that Native American girl will have the same opportunities as the children of the elite." "It may not happen in our time, Dad," replied John. "It doesn't matter," Gerald smiled. "What matters is that each generation advances a little further. And looking at your daughter, I'm sure that the next generation will take even bigger steps than ours." Years passed. The Gerald Johnson Institute expanded, establishing units in all regions of America. The mentoring program initiated at Horizon Academy became a model for schools across the country. Geratech, under the shared leadership of Camilla and Roberta, established itself as a global reference in sustainable agricultural technology. On a sunny morning, Camilla was visiting the newest unit of the Institute, located in a rural community in Mississippi. At 30, she had become a recognized leader not only in the business world, but also in the fight for a more just and equal America. As she walked among the experimental plantations, where young farmers learned sustainable techniques, she was approached by a reporter from a major national newspaper. "Ms. Johnson, your story continues to inspire young people across the country. From the episode of humiliation at school until today, how do you see your trajectory?" Camilla smiled, looking around at the young people who worked animatedly, blending traditional knowledge with cutting-edge technology. "I see it as proof that prejudice can hurt, but cannot define who we are. I see it as confirmation that a person's true value is not in their appearance or origin, but in their character and their actions." "And what message would you leave for young people who face prejudice and discrimination today?" Camilla reflected for a moment. "I would tell them what my grandfather always told me. Knowledge is the only wealth that no one can take from you. I would tell them not to let other people's opinions diminish their worth. To use each humiliation, each closed door, each look of contempt as fuel for their journey. And most importantly, that when they achieve success, they use it not to return evil for evil, but to open doors for others who come behind. The reporter asked a final question. Ms. Mitchell, the teacher who humiliated you years ago, recently gave an interview saying she deeply regretted her actions and that your story made her completely rethink her life. How do you receive this statement? Camilla smiled with genuine satisfaction, with joy and hope, because it means that transformation is possible, that people can recognize their mistakes and grow. In the end, that's what it's all about. Transformation. Of society, yes, but beginning with individual transformation, with openness to others, with the recognition that diversity is not a problem, but a richness. When the interview ended, Camilla continued her walk through the property. She stopped for a moment to talk with Yara, the Native American young woman she had met years earlier at the Institute's inauguration. Now graduated in environmental engineering, Yara led sustainability projects in Arizona and had returned to her reservation, bringing knowledge and technology to her community. Observing that young woman's interaction with the local farmers, transmitting knowledge with humility and respect, Camilla felt that the circle was complete. The girl who had once been inspired now inspired others. The young woman who had had an opportunity now created opportunities. And so, with each generation, America took one more step toward the country her grandfather had dreamed of. A country where prejudice would give way to respect, where discrimination would be replaced by recognition of each person's worth, regardless of their origin, color, or social condition. A country where young people like her, like Yara, like so many others, would no longer be humiliated by prejudiced teachers, but valued for their intelligence, their character, and their ability to contribute to a more just and equal society. Because in the end, it wasn't titles, possessions, or power that defined a person's worth, but the good they did, the lives they transformed, the legacy they left. And the legacy of Gerald Johnson, transmitted to John and to Camilla, and now spread by so many young people across America, was a legacy of dignity, resistance, and transformation. A legacy that would continue to live for many generations, inspiring others to transform humiliation into strength, prejudice into determination, obstacles into opportunities. End of story. Dear listener, if this journey of overcoming touched your heart, leave your like and subscribe to the channel for more transformative stories. Tell us in the comments, what would you do in Camilla's place? Your opinion is valuable to our community.